Good evening. Welcome to This Happy Guru. My name is Kirsty Bentley Taylor, and today I'm going to be talking about EMFs, electromagnetic fields. This is something that's kind of been buzzing around my world for the last few years. It really came into my kind of sphere of reference, if you like, into my world when we arrived back from Thailand back into England. I was immediately struck by how hard it is to meditate in this country. And it sounds crazy, but bear with me for a second. So we were living in Thailand in the middle of a jungle, right up against a mountain, far from anything, far from other houses, far from villages which had any kind of masts or communications devices, on a broad spectrum scale. Most people had like smartphones, but didn't really use them to their full extent. Certainly no PCs, stuff like that. At the very most in their house, they probably have a TV, and obviously just electricity for light. But that's pretty much about it. Fans going, and that would be pretty much about it. And in our villas which we built in Thailand, we had terrible reception for Wi-Fi. It didn't matter what we did. We just had really, really bad reception. And it was always felt like a bit of a curse because, when you're that far from home, you want to sort of stay connected with people. But it enabled me really to have a very peaceful life in terms of electromagnetic currents. And I wasn't really aware of that until I was aware when we came home that my meditation practice was being interrupted by something, that it wasn't easy for me to drop in. Whereas normally I kind of been able to drop in and clear my mind quite quickly. I was very, very aware of kind of what I always call like a humming noise, like a vibrating noise around me that I couldn't necessarily hear, but I could sense on some level, like just close your eyes and kind of invite that spatial awareness into your life. And I think you'll see what I mean. So when we moved back here, that was something that I was kind of intimately aware of whenever we were coming back here and catching up with friends and family and whatnot. But when we moved back here 2.5 years ago, one of the first things that I noticed was that it didn't matter what time of day I practiced. It didn't matter in which room I practiced. My meditation practice in this country has been severely affected by this kind of humming. I didn't really recognize it as being such a massive problem to me as it's turned out to be. But it has really stunted, I would have said, my development in that area. It's definitely kind of held me back from pursuing and getting further along in my meditations. I don't find it so easy to hold on into that sort of concentrating state, if you like, into that sense of higher awareness. And it's harder for me to connect out into it. It takes a lot longer, and it's not as uh, freeing, I think I would say. It's not as freeing in my mind in this country as when I meditate in Thailand. And we've been back there a couple of times since we've moved home. And I've noticed the shift immediately almost when I get back there. There's a sense of peace around our land. There's not this vibrating kind of this humming feeling around me. And so I've kind of started opening my eyes a little bit more and my ears to what it could possibly be, because I wasn't really aware of how Wi-Fi works, how Bluetooth works, or that sort of thing. I certainly wasn't aware that within every household that has electricity, you have electromagnetic fields running around your household. Every plug, every device that uses electricity gives off its own frequency. The plugs give off their own frequency. The electric wires in the walls are giving off frequency. So effectively, around your house, you're kind of surrounded by these electromagnetic fields, and they're to different degrees. If they're in the wall, then they tend to be quite compact and compressed, and there's some protection there. But certainly the stuff that you get off of plugs and off of devices, especially things like televisions and all of our smart devices, computers, laptops, iPads, tablets, and obviously smartphones, they're all giving off these electromagnetic frequencies. So coming back into this country and really recognizing that there's this weird vibration going on, I started looking into it. And I speak to my neighbors, and I've got one neighbor next door who was very, very open about his about his new smart meter, which is something, I don't know if you have this in your country, but it's something that we have in the UK that is getting more and more widespread. And it's essentially being sold to us as a meter that enables you to monitor the amount of electricity that you use that comes into your house and that goes out of your house. And yet there really, it seems to be no benefits to you whatsoever. Like initially it's sold to you as if it's going to help you manage it, it's going to help you save money, this is a great thing. But actually, over the past few years, when this has been integrated into our society, people are more and more coming forward and saying, actually, this isn't saving me money. Actually, I feel like I'm spending more money with this smart meter. I'm certainly much more aware of the amount of money that I'm spending. And it doesn't seem to be decreasing from previous bills in terms of usage or cost. So that kind of, when you look a little bit deeper into that, there seems to be a little bit of an ulterior motive going on for that, which doesn't really surprise me. I would hasten to guess that there's some sort of sales technique involved in that, that maybe they can monitor what it is that you're using and what it is that they might then be able to pitch at you. If you think about the use of algorithms through just our social media networks, that seems like an obvious kind of a given, that there would be some kind of salesy thing attached to these smart meters. But the other thing that these smart meters do is that they connect with every device in your house and read the amount that you're using from them. So when you bring a smart meter into your house, or they're usually like attached to the outside of the house and they're reading through, those smart meters are sending out electromagnetic scanning fields out into your house that are really designed to pick up the signals and the frequencies from all the devices that are using electricity in your house. Now, we're talking about light bulbs, we're talking about fires, we're talking about cookers, we're talking about fridges, freezers, kettles, toasters, as well as the usual things, DVD players, skyboxes, PCs, laptops, all of that sort of stuff, lights even, fans that are, extractor fans in your bathroom. All of those things are causing electromagnetic frequencies. And the smart meter is reading all of those things. So it has to be super powerful, really, to be able to get through your house and connect with all those things. And it networks. So the electromagnetic field that it sends out then begins to network in with all the other electromagnetic fields in your house. And before you know it, you're really looking at being surrounded by a grid of invisible electromagnetic currents. Now, just because you can't see these things doesn't mean to say they're not affecting you, and doesn't mean to say there isn't some consequence to being surrounded by this thing. And this is really what I've been interested in looking into over the past couple of days, because this has really come, this interest, I suppose, has developed with me over the last couple of years, but it's really come to a head in about the last 6 months. I have a friend who is super into this. She's been really quite shocked about all the information that she's found out, and she's been feeding back to me. She's very into syntonic birth, which is about the presence of energies and forces outside the mother when pregnant with the baby, and how that then transcends into the baby and through the birthing system, and what child comes out with at the other end in terms of behavioral disorders or talents, anything like that. Whatever's imposed on the lady who's pregnant from the outside is a direct influence on the child in vitro. So it's in utero, sorry. So it's been very interesting what she's been feeding back to me in terms of child development and in terms of the way that children grow, essentially, from those very formative times when you're actually in utero inside the woman, to even when you come out, and that development continues. Of course, we're growing all through our lives. Our bodies are changing, but we really grow very, very quickly in the first sort of 12 years of our life, slows down a little bit around puberty and then changes again. But we don't actually stop forming until we're around 42, when the last part of our skeletal system fuses, and that's the part in the sternum. So there's all these kind of really interesting, crazy things. But at 42, your body suddenly goes, and I'm done. In terms of the skeletal system isn't changing anymore. Bone growth, it will stop right now. There's no more development of that. And in fact, what can happen from that age is that you can begin a sort of a degenerating system, if you like, within your bones and stuff. But it happens really, really slowly. In an ordinary situation, in an ordinary circumstance, we wouldn't be too worried. But bring in these electromagnetic frequencies, and it feels like there's a lot to worry about. You know, we are, as we discussed last week, the week before, last week and last week, we're energy bodies. You know, we have our own frequencies. We're made up of our own electromagnetic currents, and we are essentially kind of full of electricity, full of this energy that's kind of buzzing around us. So we vibrate, each one of us vibrates at our own frequency, and it ranges somewhere between about 62 and 68 hertz. That's the, you know, somewhere a human being who is healthy and in a good kind of state of mind is resonating around that sort of frequency, around 62 to 68 hertz. Now, there are things that you do, like we've discussed the last couple of weeks, in terms of the vibration of the things that you draw into your body and you surround your body with, that can affect that healthy frequency. And by dropping your frequency lower, you can begin to open up yourself to diseases and to things like depression and insomnia and, you know, lots of like kind of factors in our bodies, disease, you know, like disease really in our bodies that, you know, we might put down to other factors, but it may just as well be that the resonance, the frequencies around us have developed us into a state of sort of hypersensitivity for them, because there's so many, you know, like as I'm talking about the smart meter, I'm also thinking that, you know, in England, there's like terrace housing. You know, I'm lucky enough to live in a detached house, and I'm still feeling the effects of my neighbour's smart meter. And our houses are a good 2 meters away from one another. You know, where I live, where I sleep, and you know, where my children and everything sleep, we're probably about 10 meters, I would say, maximum away from that smart meter, but we're well within its frequency. And that smart meter is constantly communicating within our next door neighbour's house towards our next door neighbour's house, like essentially away from us, for 50 meters. That's how far that reach spreads. So imagine that it's kind of like this grid system that's forming throughout suburbia, throughout our neighbourhoods. And all of these systems are just crossing over and interlocking. You know what it's like if you walk down the road with your smartphone on and you've got a Wi-Fi signal on your smartphone constantly reaching out. It'll constantly keep bleeping with, you can connect to these multiple routers, you know, Wi-Fi routers. You can connect with these hotspots. You can connect with, you know, these cafes, everything. When I walk down a high street, I must have about 4 or 5 bleeps from my phone that says I'm able to connect with this network if I've got the right password. If I'm, you know, wanting to get into that network, I need to get a password. But that's basically what's essentially open to me. And that's my phone communicating with all these devices that are dotted in all these different rooms, in all these different buildings, all over the place. And it's constantly communicating with them. As long as I have my Wi-Fi, as long as I have my Bluetooth, because Bluetooth is just is as guilty of this as Wi-Fi is, it will constantly keep communicating out to everything. And it will constantly keep receiving information from everything, because everything is always trying to connect. You know, these frequencies are always trying to find one another. As I gave you the demonstration last week with the metronomes, eventually energy just comes into its own frequency and it binds itself together, and it like attracts like. So even though you set metronomes at a different pace, eventually they'll all end up ticking the same way. And, you know, that's exactly what these frequencies are doing. They're drawing towards one another, because like attracts like. And certainly in energy, it's that law of attraction thing where it's actually looking for something that it can connect with the whole time. And that's been, you know, that's the miracle, if you like, of Wi-Fi and the miracle of Bluetooth. But it's also, when you think about this, really quite scary, because these devices are sending out frequencies that are so up and above our physical health frequency, if you like, and our mental health, our soul, our personal health frequency, that they are damaging. And we're not the only species on this planet that has a frequency that is being damaged by this. Okay, so if you think about everything that's alive, it's all got its own frequency. If you think about everything that's been made, you know, it has its own frequency. Everything around us, as we've discussed, is energy. Is, you know, when we break down the atomic, you know, the atom, we get the Bohr atom. When you break down the Bohr atom, you've just basically got energy inside. That's basically it. That's, you know, it's kind of like the consciousness, if you like, the driving force. That's it. We are energy. Everything around us is. But there is this kind of gridlock, this kind of matrix around us that is constantly affecting our own production of this, and our own electromagnetic field that we produce is constantly being bombarded with all these different kind of toxic energies that are all around us. Now, if we begin to kind of just draw imaginary lines out from our smart devices, for example, to our routers, our smart devices to our computers, our smart devices to our printers, like there's so much stuff that you just kind of connect with via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to make it all easier. With about 15 years ago, there was a big push in terms of getting digital information across to computers specifically a lot more quickly. And we brought in fiber optics. And fiber optics proved to be hugely successful. They were able to carry a lot of information, and they were able to carry it very, very quickly and very safely and securely. But it meant a lot of cable laying. It meant a lot of cost because this cable was actually quite expensive, to be able to produce. I mean, expensive, it depends on how I suppose you're looking at the cost of, of life itself. But for these companies, it was expensive to produce. It was expensive to lay. Something else needed to be done, and it needed to be a little bit, we needed to be without the wires. And that's when Wi-Fi was born, and which is very kind of unfortunate, really, because the fiber optic cable is very, very safe in terms of the ability to transmit all this kind of information and not send off such high frequency radioactive frequencies out to the world, electromagnetic frequencies out to the world that everything else that's living is susceptible to. We're not just talking about humans, we're talking about plant life, we're talking about insects, talking about birds, talking about animals. One of the documented causes for the decline in bees over Europe especially is the rise of electromagnetic fields that deeply affect them and their systems. And these are tiny little animals, remember, very complex, tiny little animals that have their own frequencies, that are doing their own thing on this world. And we've affected them with the increase of use of cellular phones and laptops and using the Wi-Fi, using the Bluetooth, using the smart meters, all that sort of thing. We've sent out these invisible matrix of frequency out into the world, and it's covering everything. There is nowadays, it's very, very rare to go into a place where you have no mobile frequency. Like 15 years ago, it was quite usual for people to be kind of walking around with their phone trying to get a frequency in a backwater town, but not anymore. They've put up that many masts. They've put up that many signal reflectors and places where the signal can be caught up from for these phones and for all the different networks that we have across the world, that it's very rare now to come into a place where you don't have full coverage or very good coverage. And that's all about the strength of the frequency. So I started kind of looking into this because of the effect that I could feel in this, in my meditation initially. And I started talking to my neighbors, and my neighbor next door told me he has a smart meter, and I started doing a little bit of research into smart meters, and I start talking to my friend, and she's like, oh my God, this is like a nightmare. Honestly, when you think about what smart meters are doing and how it is they're communicating, and this is all through the house 24/7. And that's the thing as well. All these frequencies are constant. They're constant bombardment. Unless you take the proactive step of turning everything off and literally unplugging things and sleeping under electromagnetic reflector shields. Basically, there are these amazing companies who are producing cloth that repels electromagnetic fields, and very successfully so. You can get clothes made out of them. You can get, sort of like would be the equivalent, I suppose, of like a mosquito net for electromagnetic frequency. So you've got this kind of over your bed. So when you go to sleep at night and your body's regenerating, it's not regenerating under pressure of all the high frequency stuff that is going on all around you, all these electromagnetic fields that are being sent out from all the devices that are still active in your home and still active in your neighbor's home and still trying to connect with you from other places. It's like constant. And I definitely thought that it was kind of worth covering because I haven't really been made aware of this. I don't feel, I don't feel like I've really been educated on this socially. I don't feel like my government has taken any steps to really inform the public about the dangers of electromagnetic fields. And in fact, when I started doing my own research, a lot of the scientists who are kind of doing the research are coming back with these very disturbing results about what EMFs are doing to our health, and the effects that they're having on our cellular health. And when we think about cellular, we're thinking about all sorts of things, but we are thinking about as well reproduction. There's been a massive increase in infertility, and in fact, in the Western world, scientists have said that up to 50% of average sperm count in an average man in the Western world has dropped by 50% over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And that's a massive drop in terms of the amount of healthy sperm produced. It's also the fact that, you're talking about infertility in a woman as well, in terms of being able to carry the child. Like if there's your body is designed as a woman, if there's any problem with the baby in utero, that it will destroy basically the cells. The cells will destroy themselves, and we would know that as a miscarriage. And there's been a massive rise in miscarriages as well. So it's these sort of things that make me start to really look into it, because I'm thinking, wow, you know what, like, what's gone from an interest in this, because I can hear something when I close my eyes and I try to clear my mind, and that there's just something always there. And I literally put my hands out here because it feels like it's here, drumming on the outside. And I'm trying to kind of get over it. I'm trying to pass my way through it, but it's just ever present. And there just doesn't seem to be a time. It doesn't matter if I get up at 4 a.m. It doesn't matter if I'm trying to meditate at 11, 12 o'clock at night. It's still there. Even when I turn off all the gadgets in the house as much as I possibly can, I still feel it. It's still there. So this is kind of what stemmed this for me. The interest has come from that, really. And so when I began to look into electromagnetic frequencies, we've already discussed cellular health and how our cells regenerate and how they feed knowledge back into the nucleus of the cell. It's basically the brain of the cell, if you like, is on the outside of the cell, and it feeds off of the information that's given to it from the body outside of it. So whatever's in the environment of the cell is what the cell is processing. That's basically what it's looking out at and saying, okay, what do I need to do here? How do I need to behave? Do I need to let this nutrient in? Do I let that nutrient in? What is the protocol for this? This is what the outside edge, if you like, the skin almost, if you like, of each cell is doing. It's constantly got these kind of little antennae out on it, and it's constantly kind of reading the environment around it. Now, if we're polluting that environment, not only with the toxins that we take in through through food and alcohol and smoke and, even the air quality, all that sort of thing. If we're constantly taking that in, as well as disrupting the electromagnetic fields of our own bodies with all these different frequencies, you can understand why our cells are getting more and more confused as they develop and as they move forward. And of course, when we see confusion in our cells, we see malfunction of the cells. And then when you see malfunction in the cells, you're talking about autoimmune system responses. You're talking about, things like cancer, diseases like cancer. You're talking about even like things like premature aging, inflammation, where the body can't respond properly to it. But yeah, premature aging, skin cells not being able to regenerate as quickly or regenerate with as much strength. Inflammation anywhere in the body means a cellular systematic response, which means that, everything kind of comes out to try and get rid of that inflammation, to try and look for whatever it is that's irritated and inflamed that area. And a lot of energy is spent doing that. Well, once there's all that energy spent doing that, the energy comes out from the detoxification of the body, which is a natural occurrence. Daily, your body will try and detoxify and let go of all the stuff that it doesn't need and eliminate all that waste. But there's so much to it. So tonight I'm going to really just be sort of tipping on the on tip of the iceberg. It's massive. But I've also been watching this week, and this week happens to be an EMF Health Summit. It's the Electromagnetic Field Health Summit, which is run by a guy called Lloyd Burrell, who found out for himself. He had personal experience about the toxicity of EMFs that he was living in when he was living in the UK. He's since moved to France. So if you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? France seems to be a good place to go. But he's rounded up some of the most amazing scientists and natural healers, people who have really worked in this field and seen the damage that EMFs have done to people of all different places and exposed to all different frequencies. But he himself had an experience where he became really hypersensitive to the electromagnetic fields around him as they were developing, as they were growing. It starts off with things like skin irritations and feeling kind of anxious as well. There can be that sort of thing. And so he's had his own personal journey with this, and he's been sort of crusading this for about the last 10, 15 years. So it's been really interesting to listen to what's been going on this EMF Health Summit. I'll pop a link below this or in the blurb before the program after this, and you guys can get on. It's I think there's a couple more days left, so please do. It's been fascinating to learn all about it, and I've been kind of dutifully tuning in for a couple of hours a day just to kind of listen to what these experts are saying, these scientists, what they found. And that's kind of some of the stuff that I want to share with you today. So as I said, this is stuff, we're talking about frequencies, we're talking about microwaves, if you like, the tiniest frequencies that are traveling through the air, traveling through our environment, and they're radioactive. This is radiation. Let's not be under any kind of illusion about this. One of the scientists that I listened to today actually was Dietrich Klinghardt, and he was a fascinating guy. He's done lots of sort of forefrontal research and healing and sort of scientific work around causes and effects of electromagnetic frequencies, the effect that they've had on people in terms of not just the physical health, but also your emotional health and also to do with your soul, your consciousness. And he was a very interesting guy to listen to. And he cited that the first instance that this was interesting to me because this shows how long this has been going on and how long people know about this stuff, and nothing really comes out. So he cited when he was a young man at school in the 60s, he said that he had a really great physics teacher, and his physics teacher told him about an incident that was happening at the time between Moscow, between Russia and the US. This was there was a lot of bad feeling between them at that time. And there'd been this thing called the Moscow signal, right? So I don't know if you've heard of the Moscow signal, you'll know what I'm talking about. I've never heard of this. So I just kind of printed a little bit out and I want to read you basically what happened. So the name Moscow signal was used by the United States intelligence officials to describe low power frequencies recorded in the embassy that were feared to be doing harm to the people in the building. So this was between the years of, I think, 1953 and 1975. And there was, animosity between the Americans and the Russians. So this was the American embassy in Russia being subjected, I'm going to call it. I was going to say attacked, but we'll call it subjected to try and stay unbiased to some microwave transmissions by the Russians. So low power frequencies recorded in the embassy that were feared to be doing harm to the people in the building. The microwave transmissions were only 5 microwatts per square centimetre, which is well below the power level of microwave ovens and well below what would be needed to heat anything. However, okay, so this isn't even a frequency that's high enough to heat anything. However, the frequencies were 100 times more powerful than the Soviets' maximum exposure standard. So even at that time, in 1953, they already had an awareness of microwave frequencies and what frequencies could do in terms of health and safety standards to our environment, to ourselves, to our emotional, mental, in terms of intelligence levels and physical selves. Okay, they already had that knowledge in place. However, the frequencies were 100 times more powerful than the Soviets' maximum exposure standards, which caused concern amongst US officials. The microwave beam came from a source in the Soviet apartment building around 100 meters west of the 10-floor embassy building. The beams affected the west side of the building with highest intensities between the third and the eighth floor. So it's basically, they're in another building beaming out these frequencies towards the embassy. During routine background radiation testing, the microwaves were finally detected and sourced to suspected Soviet forces in 1953. During regular monitoring of the signal, the beams were found to have increased in intensity in 1975. The discovery of these microwaves was kept secret from the public, and even individuals who had worked in the embassy during the period of suspicion that the microwaves had been directed there. There are many possible reasons the Soviet Union would have had for directing the microwave transmissions at the United States Embassy. Among these possibilities, the most likely theory that the microwave transmissions were used to trigger eavesdropping technology on US intelligence. Other theories, though, include a popular, although unproven, school of thought that this technology was used to interfere with the health, minds, or behavior of the American embassy staff. So there's a report of a preliminary study on the embassy staff that found disturbing results. For example, the report states that 1/3 of the embassy employees had developed lymphocytosis, an abnormality of the blood-forming system leading to a high count of lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell. In addition, there is believed to have been an excessively high rate of cancer among Moscow embassy personnel who were operational in the embassy from 1953 to 1976. Shielding to the microwaves was not put into place until 11 years after the signal had been detected, and recommendations have been made for the staff to be protected. So that was their initial response. As soon as it was found out and signal had been detected, they basically waited to see if anything was going to happen. They detected that there was this signal, and then they waited to see if something was going to happen. As people began to get sick and all that sort of thing, then they introduced shields and recommendations for the staff to be protected, because they recognized that these microwave frequencies were damaging the ability of their staff to maintain good mental focus, emotional focus, and to stay healthy within their body, so affecting their physicality as well. So this is like a digital toxin that was being unleashed from Russia to the Americans at that time. And that was back in the 50s. So that's well before the advent of mobile phones. That's well before, even televisions were then, in every household almost pretty much in the world. Well before smartphones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, being able to kind of read into your fridge via your computer and your desktop at work and find out whether or not you need anything, whether you need to get some milk before you come home from work, all that sort of thing. And so I got looking into the frequencies that would have been used and what are the possible things that could be aligned, or what possible diseases, what's the word I'm looking for? The things that will happen, um, the consequences, thank you, consequences to all these different frequencies. And I came into these different fields. So one of them is a static field, and the other ones are intermittent frequencies or intermediate frequencies. And they both have their different sets of kind of issues that come with them. Now, low frequencies tend to be zero point 0.1 hertz to 1 kilohertz, that sort of thing. That's quite a broad description for the static fields that they call it. But this still opens up to genotoxicity, which is, toxicity about your genes. It's affecting your DNA. All these frequencies are affecting your DNA and the way that you're able to develop and grow. It's also at these low stages. This is when you're seeing people reacting in terms of skin irritations, hyperactivity, anxieties, that sort of thing, and that is put down to electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And I mean, you can really think that just as some people are really affected by pollen counts, and affected to environmental issues, like if like some things like allergies and stuff, but also things like if you're allergic to cat hair or dog hair, anything like that. It's the same thing. So when you're exposed to electromagnetic currents when you're hypersensitive to them, you have the same response in your body. Basically produces all the same antihistamines and all those sort of responses that it would do if you have a seasonal deficiency, for example, or a seasonal affective deficiency, which means that you get hay fever, you get streaming eyes, the itchy throat, all those sorts of things. These are all reactions from hypersensitivity to the environment around you. And some people are affected by these frequencies as well, and they have a hypersensitivity to it. And they're feeling it on a lot of different levels. These frequencies can also be linked to things like depression, not being feeling clear-minded, not being able to focus on things, lethargy, just general lethargy that people seem to be sort of suffering from more and more. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but I just don't feel right. I'm so tired all the time. I don't have the energy to get up and go. And I just would far rather sort of sit in front of the television and I'm really not doing anything much. And it's beginning to get me down. I just don't have the get up and go in me anymore. Well, this could be all down to these low frequencies, because this is the sort of stuff that we are seeing in terms of, the symptoms, if you like, of being 24/7 enveloped in these frequencies, these electromagnetic frequencies from all of the electronic devices around us, and to what close proximity that we're in with them as well. I mean, if you think about your mobile phone, there's actually, if you read through, and this is crazy, right? So I found this out today as well. If you read through the disclaimers on your mobile phone, most mobile phone companies, I can't say all, because I'm going on my own, which I'm not gonna disclose what I use, but on my phone and on another brand I know as well, because this was something that was cited to me, they actually have in their disclaimer that the device should not ever be used any closer than 1 inch from the body, which actually negates pretty much all the use, I would say, average use of mobile phones, because as far as I'm concerned, most people carry their mobile phones on them, or at the very least in a handbag, or a bag that, might be more than 1 inch from their body. To be fair, if it's in a handbag or a rucksack, something like that, it might be a good few inches from their body. But a lot of people carry their mobile phones in their hands, they carry them in their pockets, they're putting them in the back pocket of their jeans or their trousers, front pocket of their trousers. There's a lot of people who are carrying these devices very, very close to themselves within their own electromagnetic frequency, because your electromagnetic frequency goes out a few feet from your body. That's the depth of frequency as well. And so, we are carrying these devices around that in the small print of have a disclaimer that says, you shouldn't be carrying them, close to yourself. You should be using them at a safe distance. And that's the disclaimer. That's the small print that none of us get. It probably won't be in your, little printouts that, that Apple or Samsung or whatever give up with your phones. But if you go online and you look and you read through the small print of how to use your mobile phone and the disclaimers that they give, it gives you some idea. And again, on that process, what I found out today as well is that insurance companies and reinsurance companies won't touch anybody who has any disease that could be linked to electromagnetic frequencies from devices. Now, they bombed out of this area of business, bearing in mind that this is, a genuine kind of concern for scientists from all over the world. The insurance and reinsurance companies bombed out of insuring anybody for, any kind of electromagnetic device disease or symptom or, issue that arises 15 years ago. That was when they were like, nah, we're not touching this. We don't want to know. And if they can prove that it might be to do with an your own personal exposure to electromagnetic devices, that will kind of get them off and away from the hook. Depending on your lifestyle choices, that can actually, render you uninsured for some diseases, and especially if they are resonant around the mind, around the brain, and around the heart, around the lungs and the chest. Because these are the areas that seem to be most affected by the electromagnetic frequencies as well. So we've got things like when we're looking at these static fields, these low-level frequencies, We're looking at neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, like Alzheimer's, like ALS. There's also been some correlation between like ADHD, all these kind of, I'm going to say new. I don't think they are necessarily new things that have come up, but certainly the increase in the number of people suffering from them is off the scale. Now, when I went to school, this is just from my own personal experience, right? When I went to school, I had never heard of ADHD or ADD, never heard of them. This wasn't something that was in my school. This wasn't something that anyone in my primary school or my secondary school suffered from that I was aware of. Relatively new terms. I mean, we're talking, I went to school a good, 30 odd years ago now, So we are talking a long time ago. Having said that, my daughter is now, or one of my daughters is now in a class with 12 people who need extended care, shall we say, because of their levels on what we now are calling the spectrum, the mental health spectrum. 12 people in her class. Now, she's in a primary school. She's in year 5. And I know that basically the levels of children coming into schools now with these presenting problems or these presenting issues has risen to such a great extent that they are, the schools are needing to kind of divide them out, to classes in equal portions so that everybody has the help and the time that they need, to be able to learn effectively in school and have the support that they'll need, because they need extra help to be able to sit down, to be able to understand, to be able to calm down, to be able to focus in on the work and not be such a, have so much of a, negative experience, essentially, because, you operate differently to other people. So that's my own personal experience with, ADHD and ADD and the increase that children are suffering from. There's so much of it. It's scary to me. And again, I wasn't really aware of this until we came back from Thailand to England. And suddenly, it became glaringly obvious. My friends' children are being, tested. It's a blanket term, everybody's, they've got a lot of energy or something like that. Let's test them for the ADHD or ADD. But there's a lot of children being blanketed under the spectrum because of behavioural changes or behavioural issues that have been cited by the parents or by the school as being challenging in one way or another. It's a lot of it. There's a lot. So the fact that these kind of neurodegenerative diseases coming from low frequencies are on the rise, and these frequencies are prevalent throughout our environment, all around us, within our home, within our schools, on, again, 24/7, you're bathing in this toxicity. It feels like there's a very obvious correlation. There are so many things. There are so many influences on us in the world today that really are negative. And again, I feel like it's important to discuss these things because I'm not getting any information from my government. I'm not being protected. I'm not being informed. I'm not being made aware. I'm not being made aware by anyone either. It's not kind of even just the government that I've got beef with about this, really. I feel like the makers and the producers of all of these things shouldn't be just hiding away any dangers on their website a million miles away from the actual product itself. Much like cigarettes now carry a warning saying, smoking kills, or this sort of thing. I believe that there should be the same health warnings on all of our smart devices and all of our devices, in fact, that really give out strong electromagnetic frequencies, because that would put the onus back on the companies that are producing these to actually produce a better product that protects the users of the product from the frequencies that are being sent out, by the nature of whatever it is that you're talking about, be it a toaster, be it a PC, be it a smartphone, whatever. And it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. So it's like you're talking about these static fields are being linked to cancer and childhood leukemia, modification of brain waves, the cardiovascular system, secretion of melatonin, implants, indirect effects, again, like more emotional effects are caused by these static fields. Lowering your frequency, is like lowering yourself into a pit of depression, essentially. We're always trying to raise our frequency, right? It's kind of, we're talking again about like the high vibe, raise your frequency, moving into a higher level of consciousness, and higher consciousness is on a higher frequency of around 1,000 gigahertz, so right up there. And so this is all kind of low level frequency that is bringing our frequency down and taking us into disease, malfunctioning our cells. The intermittent frequencies that come up then from 1 kilohertz to 10 megahertz, this can be like a radio frequency as well. These have been kind of linked to a lot. The effects of them have been linked to a lot. And one of the things I suppose I don't want to be a scaremonger, but I am going to reflect back everything that they're saying, because it's just boom, boom, boom. The word cancer is coming up all over this, and it makes sense, because as we've learned about over the last few weeks about, cellular health, about how it's not just about what you draw into your body in terms of nutrients. It's not just about exercise and detoxification through exercise and all that sort of thing. It's not even just about the energy, that you produce for yourself. It's also about the energy that we live in, the environment that we live in, how our cells respond to the environment that's around us, how we perceive the environment around us. Now, if we've got all these frequencies affecting our emotional health, our physical health, our psychological health, and affecting our conscious health, our consciousness, because Dr. Kleinhardt also says that he believes that, these electromagnetic currents are one of the main causes to people, this huge increase we seem to see in young people causing atrocities, all this sort of thing. It's about mental health as well. It's about being in a good space. It's about being able to resonate healthily at your own frequency, rather than being affected by all the things that are around you the whole time, and all the things that you carry around with you the whole time. It makes the spirit almost want to leave the body, because he'd had experience, and this was fascinating as well. He'd had experience of people who had almost lived in an outer body experience day after day because of the degeneration of their bodies, and yet their souls were still almost kind of intact, if you like. They're suffering from, very bad, very quickly degenerative diseases. Can't speak tonight. And reflecting back that their selves, their conscious selves, really wanting to do this, wanting to do that, being held by the body, and being held back by the body, and so feeling this detachment from the body, beginning to move away from the body, so that you feel like, you're stuck, your consciousness is up and above, and your body's just kind of grounding you down, unable to do anything. And this has been something that he found in his patients, in the people that he was dealing with, and through the scientific research that he'd been a party to as well. So this again was kind of fascinating, that actually it can get to a point where if your body, sort of is operating on a much lower frequency, you actually can distance your soul. You actually can distance your consciousness from your body. So separating self. Well, the minute you start to separate yourself, that's it, isn't it? That's the beginning of the end almost, because if the soul doesn't have a healthy body to reside in, not only will it distance itself, but it will cut right off. This is when we're, seeing people, really choosing to leave the body behind, because they know that they can't survive in this any longer. They can't stay in this any longer. The frequency, the vibration of it all is just too low to house the energy force that we all are. So this is, this was fascinating to me as well. So these intermediate frequencies of 1 kilohertz to 10 megahertz, and radio frequencies from 10 megahertz to 300 gigahertz have been linked to things like cancer, again, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EEG and brain activity. It's those sorts of things as well, whether you cognitive, psychomotor, and motor memory functions. So depleting memory functions, depleting the speed with which you can cognitively process, things that are coming into your life, challenges, emotional issues, anything like that. Also sleep. Now, sleep is imperative for us in terms of a time to rest, to be able to regenerate our bodies. And it's one thing, the fact that we're regenerating our bodies under this kind of cloud of electromagnetic frequencies, but also to be able to, not have a good pattern of sleep and to not be able to actually rest while we're doing that really disables the ability to regenerate overnight, which is essentially what we're doing. And it's that whole thing as well of the soul being able to leave the body during during nighttime, where it kind of resonates around a foot or 2 feet above your head, and you're able to kind of dream outside of your body, if you like. But with all these radio frequencies, that's going to make that whole thing harder. Ascension into higher consciousness, again, harder. Doesn't surprise me on any level, because this is the experience that I've had with my meditation. So blood-brain barriers are affected, fertility, genotoxicity, microwave hearing, indirect effects, therapeutic applications. So these are all favorite. You can use radio frequencies for therapeutic applications, but there's certain frequencies that you can use. When the Russians were using their microwaves to influence, let's say, I'm trying to remain politically correct, influence the American embassy in the 1950s, they were using the same frequency that our mobile phones use now, right? So they were poisoning, basically. They were biologically affecting, emotionally affecting, psychologically affecting the staff of the American embassy in Russia with this, frequency of, I think it was 2.4, 2.5, or 2.4 to 5 gigahertz. And it's the same frequency that our mobile phones run on now. Now, another reason that this is important to mention is because we're just about, in the UK anyway, you may already be over there in the US, you may already be up to 5G, but we're just about to introduce 5G into this country. And that is like taking it from 2.5 megahertz to like 10 megahertz. It's enormous. So the damage that we're seeing caused by the frequencies that we're using now is about to be magnified, double, if not more. And I really think that's, kind of one of the reasons that this is such an important topic to be bringing up and to be going over. We're looking at a huge amount of toxicity, not just for ourselves, like I said, but also for the planet to cope with. The planet in terms of the food, that we are eating. If all the food is vibrating at a lower vibration, it's going to affect the vibratory value, the nutritional value of that food to our bodies. We're drawing in this food for its nutritional value that comes from the energy that it holds. And we need that energy to be on optimum frequency. We need, it to be resonating high, so that when we take it into our bodies, we're absorbing that energy, and it's enabling us to heal, as well as for all the nutrients that our biological body needs. We need all this sort of stuff on an energy level as well. So it was, in that sense, we're talking about plants, we're talking about insects, we're talking about animals as well. And remember that when you're eating an animal, they've been consuming all this sort of stuff as well. So we're not just talking about toxins coming in now from fertilizers and from, grain products and all the chemicals and the hormones that our agricultural industry really kind of pumps into meats. We're also talking about the radioactive frequencies that these animals are having to live in before they go to slaughter, and not just them, but their food as well. So what they're taking on board is contaminated nutrition, and what we are then taking on board is secondhand contaminated nutrition. So there's a lot to consider there. Oh, excuse me. One of the things that really came through to me over the, listening to these scientists talking, was really how long people have known about this for. This is not new research. Like I say, this kind of always, started, was known about a lot longer ago than, the advent of mobile phones. It's just that the information has been ignored. The scientific research has been ignored in favor of really money making as always. But there's certainly been a lot of research done on this, and there are a lot of people who have spent a lot of time researching this. There's actually been, is it 26,000? Where's my notes? I've got a new tab. It's 26,000 papers on the EMF portal. You can go onto that, www.emf, where is it? Let me get it up here. All right, so another good one actually is www.emf-portal.org/English or EN. Right, so that's one of the places that you can go to for this information. You can also look up Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. So that's Dietrich, D-I-E-T-R-I-C-H, Klinghardt, Klinghardt. He's a MD, PhD, founder of the Klinghardt Academy in the USA, the American Academy of Neuroscience as well. This is somebody who is a real pioneer in his field, especially to do with electromagnetic fields as well. And he's actually working with patients directly to clear their hypersensitivity to electromagnetic fields and the neurotoxicity that they are experiencing because of the radioactive frequencies that they've been exposed to. He was, this is the guy whose physics teacher told him about the Moscow signal to begin with, and that's where all of his work sort of stemmed from. And he was talking about loads of stuff. He was like, honestly, bombarded with information is not even the thing, but he was talking about how in the 50s in England, the same radioactive frequency that is used by our mobile phones was used in orphanages to sterilize the orphans. It was used against or with psychiatric patients in psychiatric wards, again, to sterilize them. It induces epigenetic damage to the point of sterilization. This is what his kind of point was, that at 2.4 gigahertz, which is the frequency of the average mobile phone, with 4G, not with even with 5G. So this is about to sort of, if it's going up to 10, it's kind of going to treble, quadruple in strength. It induces this epidemic damage to the point of sterilization. Now, if we're all using these devices, we are looking at generations of people who are men, especially, who are going to be severely affected by the frequencies that are permeating our world. Now, we're already seeing unprecedented amounts of reduction in sperm and in fertility generally across men and women. It's, this is something that has been looked into, and scientists are sort of saying, they're not really sure if it is that. In fact, it could be something else. It could be that the neurotoxins, it could be this, it could be that, but it's definitely got to be a consideration, above and beyond the dietary factor, the exercise factor, and all that sort of thing. When you think about the fact that we are energy bodies as well, and that is a hugely significant part of what we're made up of, this has got to be a massive influence on the way we work. And we are talking about a cellular level, so of course we're talking about the tiniest little parts of our body. So what I kind of have taken from that, I suppose, is that if we're all using these mobile phones and we can see that, sperm count in men has dropped significantly in the last sort of 20 odd years, and we can align that not just with, the kind of the dietary requirements, all that sort of thing, lifestyle and all that as well. We can actually align that with the rise of technology within our homes, within our living environments as well. Then I think that's quite a strong correlation there. And essentially, we're sterilizing generation after generation of human beings. Now, the interesting thing about this, which doesn't seem to be counted in when you look at the kind of the dietary thing as well, is that men in developing countries don't have this problem. This is in the Western world, if you like. This is in developing countries, that they're experiencing this problem on a high level. This infertility problem, this drop in the increase of in the development of sperm. Um, this is happening in Western countries. And if you think about developed countries, we're absolutely surrounded by technology, whereas in developing countries, not so much. They might have a television, they might have a telephone, they'll have, the electricity the majority of the time, that sort of thing, for light and whatnot, but they haven't got the smartphones, they haven't got the kettles, the toasters, the ovens, the fridges, they haven't got all of that stuff. So they're not exposed to these frequencies on such a high level, because the main message that came across to me really is it's all about the massive impact of all of these frequencies that we live within, and how, and the amount of kind of skin, if you like, that is exposed to them. So, for example, carrying your mobile phone directly against your skin is like one of the most harmful things that you can do with your mobile phone, because you've got those electromagnetic frequency waves coming directly onto your skin. So you're talking about skin, cellular health on your skin, with your new fascia tissue through into your circulatory system. It will affect your respiratory system, your hormonal system, your endocrine system. We're talking about all these systems of your body being massively affected by these electromagnetic frequencies. And again, it's not just the Wi-Fi, it's Bluetooth as well. And again, interestingly, Russia and Iran are using different frequencies which don't do the same damage. So what is it that they found out that we don't know? That's kind of what I want to know. This is one of my questions that I was like, whoa, well, what is it that the Russians, because the Russians must have found out about something that we're kind of not aware of, I think, or weren't aware of, certainly in the 50s. They certainly were, pioneering, the sort of sly combats, if you like, weren't they? The kind of going behind and using, I wouldn't say chemical warfare, but warfare that's, very under the table, if you like. That if they're still using these frequencies that don't affect, the human body now, then they're onto something. They know something. So Russia and Iran, still using different frequencies to this day than the ones that we're using for our mobile phones. And still, getting coverage and all that. There's not, you can go to Russia and you make a phone call just as easy as you go to the United States and make a phone call. So again, it feels a little bit sinister that this isn't all being discussed, that this isn't actually out in the open, able for people to make their own decisions and, find out about how it is that we can be stopping the damage that we're going to be causing ourselves, and not just ourselves now, but ourselves for generations to come, and not just humans, but plants and insects and animals. Again, generations now being affected, and generations to come will be affected, because you can guarantee that if our sperm cells are affected by these waves, then so will that of a cow or a sheep or a horse or a dog or whatever. Dr. Robert O. Becker said that the greatest polluting element in Earth's environment is the proliferation of electromagnetic fields. So the greatest polluting element, that's above and beyond plastic, oil spillages, gas leaks, nuclear weapons. The greatest polluting element in Earth's environment is the proliferation of electromagnetic fields. And it's because it's an epidemic that's spreading through every single household and out from that household. Like I say, I can't walk down the road without my phone connecting to about 1 million different Wi-Fi hubs and networks and all this sort of thing. So this is definitely something that we need to be aware of, and not just kind of aware of in a sense of, I'm aware of it. I should talk with my phone, out like this or whatever, but also in being able to get into ways of working that enable us to protect ourselves, especially overnight. You think during the day, we are moving around a lot, generally speaking. We are moving around from one environment to the other. So we are passing in and out of different frequencies and that sort of thing. But at night time, not only are we static when we go to sleep, but we're also static in an environment that is blanketed by electromagnetic fields. And at night time, our body calms right down and regenerates. So all the burning off of things stops, and the calming down and the regeneration of cells, begins. And this is goes going on throughout our body. We rest and we revive and reproduce ourselves, basically. Now, if we're resting in an environment that is toxic to us, then that's going to be affecting every one of those cells that's regenerating itself. And we are taking forward cellular information, cellular DNA, that is distorted because of all these frequencies. So what can we do about it? Right? What can we do about it? So Dr. Kleinhardt gave us some interesting ways of being able to kind of eliminate the amount of EMFs that you have around you at all times, and more specifically, how you can protect yourself from them within the home and on your person. So one of the first things that he said was about sort of detoxing from all the electromagnetic fields in your home. And that was one of the first things that he said, was just to basically turn everything off when you're not using it, when you don't need to. So for example, instead of leaving your Wi-Fi router going on all day, when you go out to work, turn it off, leave it off, because then your pets and the plants in your house and your garden and everything else aren't going to be affected by these electromagnetic fields that are constantly out throwing things out there trying to connect. Right? So it's, obviously turn all these things off. Turn them off definitely overnight. And not just the devices themselves, turn off at the plug. There's still electromagnetic frequencies coming through from the plug. There's a lot of companies who develop things that you can put in the plug to be able to release this. And I think, there are a lot of ideas as to how you can sort of save yourself a little bit more by just doing simple things. It's like we talk about saving electricity, just turn off the lights when you go out of a room. Same thing whenever you're kind of going out, just, or unplug things, keep things unplugged and only plug them in when you actually need them. That would be a good way of being able to cut down on the levels of frequency in your household. But the interesting thing with Dr. Klinghardt was that he actually cited, yoga texts and yoga bodies as to how electromagnetic fields actually affect us, which was obviously interesting for me. Being a yoga teacher, I was kind of, drew a lot of parallels to what I already know. And it was interesting that, a scientist of that esteem as well was still quoting like Vedic texts, like yoga texts from 12,000 years ago, and actually marrying beautifully the scientific work that, we're seeing now with the philosophies, if you like, really, of yoga being passed down from generation to generation to generation. So I want to find the bits that you can do to detox. Here we are, 5 levels of healing. So it mentioning the 5 bodies of self based around yogic understanding and teachings around your 5 bodies. And this was where I think Dr. Klinghardt also mentioned about the the distance between a malfunctioning body, if you like, and the soul, and the fact that actually if you cut out all these frequencies, you can vibrate on a higher level and you can ascend quicker and you can go into higher conscious states quicker, and so this is sort of something that I think we should all be doing. I think we should all be getting into the into the habits of turning everything off at the plugs and unplugging things if we're not using them at the time. I know it sounds inconvenient, but at the same time, if you think about a kettle, for example, when you go over to a kettle and you hit that switch, it only takes a minute when it's turned off to just hit the other switch on the wall, doesn't it? We're not talking about going into another room to be able to do this. We're not talking about even having to get up to go and do something else. We're talking about while you're there and you're pouring out your cup of tea with the freshly boiled water from the kettle, then just turn off the plug. Turn it off and unplug it if you want to go the full hog with it all. So detoxing in that sense, certainly they were very, very clear about, turning off all devices over the course of the evening. So when you're not using something, turn it off and unplug it. And certainly when you go to bed at night, turn everything off and unplug stuff if you can. The new wireless routers have made it quite hard. You used to be able to turn wireless on and off, Wi-Fi on and off. but they've made it a little bit harder now, so that it's, you know, when you have to reset it all and all that sort of thing, so that it's kind of just designed to be left on. But you know, there are ways of getting around these things, so be creative, turn it off, especially at night time. One of the other things he said was that the metals that are held in our body, the toxic metals especially, that we get from contaminated fish and from, you know, water sources, and from agricultural sources, fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing, that haven't been raised organically, and carry metals from aluminium, iron, lead, you know, all these awful, if you like, awful, but we're overrun with them. And the thing is that, you know, as you know, metal is a great conducive for electricity. So what's happening is these electromagnetic fields are bouncing off of the metals that are wedged into our body, and bouncing off, not out of the body, but bouncing further into another part and affecting that part more. So we've got, that's one problem. So detoxing the metals out of your system was something else that he really raved on about, like to the point of removing your fillings. And, you know, if you've got any titanium plates in your jaw, having those removed and replaced. You know, big work, you know, big words, big work. But there was also these, I can't remember what they were called. It was Little Tree something or other, this company that were making these clothes that you could wear that would limit you from Little Tree Group there. They've got a bag that you can put your Wi-Fi router in, which minimizes the electromagnetic currents from your router. They also do clothes. They do a t-shirt that covers. They've got loads of stuff on there. So maybe go on there, littletreegroup.com, and have a look into what it is that, you know, you feel like you might need to help detox from you know, detox the frequencies and the heavy metals out of your system as much as you possibly can. So yeah, being able to do that, like, really protect yourself by turning everything off. And if you can't turn things off all night long, then get one of these bags, you know, these sort of reflective bags that keep all the negative stuff inside, and, you know, and protect you on the outside, because they sound like a great idea. And certainly, you know, I listen to a lot of music, and I carry around my phones and my laptops and stuff with me. It would be great to have a little bag that I can kind of slip them in, so that I know that, you know, nothing can get into them. So yeah, removing metal in your mouth, titanium implants, they would need to be replaced as well. You know, it's a lot, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you kind of need to change, but and maybe it's the grandeur of it all that has meant that nothing much has changed. But I do really think this is a valid conversation to be having with everybody, really, because it's so important to know, I suppose, all of the things that affect us. You know, we put a lot of things down to, like, oh, I just can't be bothered this morning, or, you know, I'm feeling lazy, I'm feeling a bit grumpy, all those sort of things. Maybe sometimes you are, and you can put your back, but maybe sometimes you just get up just tired, and exhausted. And that's one of the things that these heavy metals in your system will do for you as well. Kind of just deflate you, and yeah, you just, the lethargy is really, really set in. So one of the next things in the house was, like I've said, to pull out all the plugs emitting the electromagnetic fields, most of which have been shown to cause cancer. The number 4 was no smartphones. Again, another little website for you, takebackyourpower.com, which, so you're looking at their surveillance devices for electrical companies. And where am I going? Frequencies for, things that will affect the frequency of your, of your device. Sorry, my brain's going today. I'm getting tired. So all this work on the computers, and all this exposure. But we're basically talking about, you know, being able to try and remove as many metal substances in your body as you can. Now, one of the interesting things to me was that when Dr. Klinghardt talks about removing the metals in your body, there was loads of natural stuff that you could use. And a couple of the things that came up I discussed last week, which were essential oils, and specifically the essential oils of coriander and rosemary, both of which are really great for clearing the mind and clearing adrenal fatigue. And they're also great detoxes, coriander especially, for getting rid of heavy metals. You can drink. The thing is with the essential oils, right, is that they are high frequency themselves, which is what you want. When you're suffering from a low frequency disease or something like that, you want to be able to raise your frequency up, right? Now, essential oils are extracted from the center, the heart of the plant, if you like. The ones that I use are doTERRA, and they are, they've never let me down. They're the purest of the pure, certified pure, therapeutic grade, which means you can even take them internally. And that's what I would recommend doing with the coriander and the rosemary, is you can pop them in like a little veggie cap, and take a drop of each a day, just to help detoxify the metal out of your system. There are other things that you can add into that as well. But those were the sort of things I thought, you know what, the essential oils would be fabulous here because they're high frequency anyway. You can take those two internally, pop them in a little veggie cap, down them with the rest of the vitamins in the morning, and you're beginning to detoxify the heavy metals that are built up in your system, which are natural conducers to the energy and the frequencies that we are picking up on from all these EMFs around us. So yeah, turning off all the fuses in the house. No smart meters. So there's a new movement called Take Back Your Power, which helps you fight the onslaught of smart meters. I mean, in England, we've been told that, this is what's coming in for everybody, but they haven't chased me yet. I haven't had a single thing through the door, anybody, call me or anything like that about the smart meters. So I'm putting my foot down when they do, and I'm not saying absolutely no. But again, same things, turn everything off. Turn it all off at night time. It doesn't need to be on. Especially when you're regenerating, especially when you're resting, turn it all off. And then and then he went into some of the things that you can actually buy. So there's this thing called Home Shield, which is a Swiss Shield paint which protects your home from electromagnetic frequencies from the outside. So would be perfect, for example, with Barry and his smart meter. So it's got this paint needs to be grounded. It needs to have a layer of copper painted onto it, so it can connect down with the ground as well. It just sounds fabulous. But you basically you basically paint the whole of your outside of your house, and then you can get these curtains that are made out of these sleep shields, like I spoke to you about earlier with the mosquito net type thing that you can sleep under. That's another product from the same company. That you can actually get curtains and stuff that have sleep shields sewn into them, so that again, the rear of the curtain, as you pull it across, and the rear of the curtain is pushing back away all the electromagnetic fields that have that would ordinarily come in and bother you. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. If you can kind of get some of that stuff going, be great. Protective clothing, metal coated with pore size that reflects EMFs. Again, being able to cover yourself physically as well would be amazing, because then you know that only the parts that are actually exposed are the parts that are being exposed to stuff like that. And then there's these things called the Stetzer filters, which are plug caps that reduce the household currents during the day. So again, as I've said to you, unplug everything, you can plug in one of these Stetzer filters. And then you're going to be experiencing a lot less kind of Wi-Fi in and around your house and in the area that you and your family live. Dr. Kleinhardt said that everybody's consciousness is affected by this, and we are still affected in the same way. So one of the other things that he quite rightly pointed out was the popularity of iPhones and iPads is really due to a sense of connection, but also due to a chemical imbalance that it causes in the brain. So whenever you are on a smartphone or anything like that, you know, that kind of interaction with it, that, oh, I'm on there, I'm connected with everybody. That feeling and that thought process that goes through your mind. This is how I've understood it anyway. That begins to become almost an addiction, right? So we know that people are addicted to social media. We know that people are addicted to their smartphones already. But we're also talking about on a higher level of energy consciousness, that the energy is addicted to itself in another form as well. And that's really, really important to understand, because, you know, you're going to need to kind of break away from all this, like the clothing and everything. The paint is great. You know, we really need to just decrease exposure would be the number one thing. You need to kind of stabilize your system, which is, again, using the coriander, using the rosemary, using propolis, which is like a plant byproduct as well, to be able to kind of clear things out. And he also said that he'd found, because of you know, the number of people that he's seen, he'd got this thing called a retrovirus taming. So this is like where basically what happened on a cellular level when they did experiments on rats, or exposing them to radioactive waves from a cell phone, was that the rats developed cancers and tumors of the heart and the brain super quick, like super quick. And they couldn't fight off any viruses that were introduced either. So that was something that was, you know, quite an eye-opener to me. It kind of goes with the idea that the brain is such an amazing functional instrument, and we know so very little about it, that the fact that, you know, so many neurological disorders, if you like, have been linked to this sort of stuff, that there's got to be something in it. You know, Dr. Kleinhardt said that he believes that Alzheimer's, you know, the majority of us will be suffering from Alzheimer's within the next sort of 20 years. He said he reckons that 50% of us will suffer from Alzheimer's by 2030, I think it was. So, you know, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who need a lot of care. And you know, for me, it's quite scary. My nana died with Alzheimer's, and she suffered alongside that for a good few years before she passed on. And she, you know, relatively speaking, led a really healthy life. Like, I could never understand, you know, well, what does this Alzheimer's come from? But it's being linked to all that sort of stuff as well. And of course, you know, it's jumping from the 4G that we've got to the moment, which is resonating around about 2.5 gigahertz, up to the 5G, which is going to be 5.8 gigahertz. You know, is a massive increase in radioactivity. It just feels like we're absolutely surrounded now. And there's nothing that we can do. But of course we can make these decisions to paint the house, and, you know, and ground it in with the copper. We can make decisions to wear the t-shirts, and, you know, to wear the paraphernalia of this, so that actually we not only protect ourselves, but we promote the idea that other people can protect themselves as well. And I suppose it's recognizing that this is a reality. That is the thing that I've still got to get my head around. You know, I've been sitting for hours and hours over the last couple of days listening to these people, and I'm just like, you know, how can this be? Like, I don't really notice anything too much. Like, I certainly, as I look around my house, I would never think that there was, you know, such kind of sinister play at work, you know. But yeah, it's crazy to me. I'm a little bit obsessed now. Now I'm going around unplugging everything. You know, it's gotten to be that sort of stage. You can get different clothing from this, what's it called? Littletreegroup.com, littletreegroup.com. Like I say, a bag for the Wi-Fi router, which means that even when it's working, it's protected from other EMFs, and connecting with them as well. Cordless phones are one of the worst. If you can, get rid of your cordless. Broadcasting 24/7, these frequencies. So just get rid of those things that you don't necessarily need and that are still kind of ticking on. So the next thing, I wanted to mention was, I can't find it. Confused by this book. Oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention was about consciousness. So I talked briefly about the way that when your body becomes ill, your consciousness, your energy, yourself begins to move out of the host body, if you like. It's not going to be held back by it, so it might as well move out into a comfortable place. That to me was hugely very, very telltale in terms of the way the psychological responses that we're seeing from our teenagers and our young people these days. Suicide is on a massive increase, like almost the world over. Again, it's not the developing countries. These these guys who are constantly trying to play catch up and yet really can't afford to for one reason or another, are actually saving themselves. It might be a good idea to actually say to them, you don't worry about it, guys, because honestly, you're going to be living far and above and away beyond the majority of us. 50% of us are going to have Alzheimer's within the next sort of 10 years, then that to me is really, really worrying. That to me is kind of absolutely unacceptable, especially when there are things that we could be doing. Like I say, there is the clothes, there is the paint. There is other things that we can be doing as well. So I think it's, the disease side of it is really, really important to remember. And important, I suppose, because we need to settle this. We need to settle this as a reality in our minds so that we can go forward and make decisions that will help not just ourselves, but the future generations, because it's only going to get worse. This is the thing with the 5G, it's only going to get worse. They're bringing it in from 2.4 gigahertz, which is a really dangerous frequency for our health. It was a frequency that was used by the Russians on the Americans in the 50s to disrupt their neural pathways, to disrupt their body frequencies, to disrupt them, full stop. We're going to a 5G, which is 5.8 gigahertz. So, double what it has been. And I think that we will see a massive increase in the diseases that are related and the psychological and emotional incidents that are related to low frequency, which again, low frequency is things like depression, anxiety, guilt, shame, all those sorts of things. So it's really, really important that we understand that, and that we understand that even though we can't see these things doesn't mean that they're not there. It's fascinating, really, but it's also very scary, all this sort of stuff. Whenever your frequency is dropped, you are putting the immune system in a compromised position. For example, I think I told you last week, you resonate, say 62 to 68. That's the average humans, somewhere between that. And you take a cup of coffee. Immediately, as soon as you bring that coffee towards you, your vibration drops down into the late 50s, right? Flu symptoms. If it drops by about 10, you've got you're open to flu symptoms. Diseases like Candida hold at 52. Epstein-Barr and 42 is at 42 hertz. And this was all from Bruce Taino of Taino Technology. He made a machine that accurately gave a percentage of the levels of waves that are all around us at the moment today. And so, he, like I said earlier, 26,000 papers on EMFs and the danger of EMFs that have been submitted just through the World Health Organization. And yet none of this is out for us to know. None of this is kind of written down on a piece of paper that is actually legible in your mobile phone or in your tablet or, in your PC or even your desktop. It's all connecting all the time. If you can, move your stuff back to fiber optic cable or back to, plugging in rather than Wi-Fi all the time. Try to turn off when you're not using things. Try to turn off all the different devices so they're not constantly, coming out at you. And detoxify your body from the highest metals using coriander, rosemary, propolis. What was the other thing she said? She said she could make a special recipe anyway. So yeah, it's something to do with being able to protect yourself. You can buy like a mosquito net thing that goes over your bed so that you're protected at night. You can buy clothing. There's all sorts, but it's definitely worth doing something. Even if you just get into the stage of you're just talking to your phone like that rather than actually holding up to your ear. Even if you're mindful to the fact that wear a bag today, and instead of leaving it right up close next to you or in your pocket or in your sleeve, anything like that, put it in the back of your bag so it's a good few inches away from you. That will definitely kind of, will definitely help. So I think what I wanted to kind of sort of suggest today as well is that there's no need to panic. There's no need to freak out about any of this stuff. But I do like the idea of making people aware. It's if I always feel like if you're aware, then you can make an educated decision or a conscious decision. If you don't know what you want to say or anything like that, then it's fine to ask the parents. But if you're talking about if you're talking about all the different frequencies that you're resonating in with you, then you need to be quite clear on what ones that it is that you can allow in at what times of the day and how many there are affecting you at different times of the day. We're talking about frequencies coming in from school, from smart boards, children now using iPods and pads and stuff like that. Children carrying around mobile phone devices with them in school. And although they're supposed to all be turned off, probably not being turned off. I know this from my son. Every single one of his friends has a mobile phone. Or some device on them, if not one or two. Remember, smartwatches, same thing, directly into your pulse, directly into your bloodstream, into your, close up next to your skin. And a lot of people wear their watches on their left hand. So it's affecting all the emotions in you as well as well as the blood that's then going to circulate around the rest of your body, because your blood comes out into the left hand side of the body first before regenerating, coming back up through the right. All these sorts of things are huge considerations for us, and yet we're not being told, we're not discussing, we're not opening a discussion about it. So I do urge you to go on to this EMF Health Summit. If you can. If you just Google it, there's loads of ways that you can join up online and get into some of the research that's being done and learn about it, because it's fascinating. And in the meantime, like I say, begin to kind of try to detox yourself a little bit from it all. Where you can, cut things out. Don't use them. Instead of using an electronic toothbrush, for example, go back to using handheld. Instead of using an electronic whisk, go back to handheld. If you're not using the television, don't leave it on standby. Turn it off completely. Same thing with the toasters and with the kettles and that sort of thing. If you're not using them, then disconnect them and stop that electromagnetic frequency. Say no to a smart meter. Like I say, from experience and from the general consensus from the public in the UK, they're not saving you any money. So don't be fooled by that little ruse. And it's likely that they're being used to counter information from your home so that you can be just sold extra products. So do yourself a favor and do the environment around you a favor, and don't get on board with the smart meters. Mobile phones, turn them all off at night. Turn everything off. If you don't need the Bluetooth on your phone constantly, then turn it off. If you don't need the Wi-Fi on, then turn it off. If you've got the 4G, do you need to be on the Wi-Fi all the time? Does it need to be constantly connecting? Can you turn your phone off for periods of the day so that you're giving yourself a little bit of respite, bearing in mind that it's probably likely to be the closest form of degenerating microwave radioactive frequency that is with you 24/7 pretty much. We live with our smartphones these days. So as I said, also things that you can do as well is you can use things with a higher frequency to be able to raise the level of frequency in your body to counteract these frequency disturbances within yourself. So again, I talked last week about different frequencies and things that hold different frequencies. So for example, different foods, organic foods, green foods, especially things like kale was right high up there, really nice high frequency food. And McDonald's processed food, that sort of thing, was right down low again, proper, on the zero spectrum, which, the zero spectrum was the one that was leading to genotoxicity, hypersensitivity, neurodegenerative diseases, food with no value, no frequency, or a zero frequency, it is no good for you. You're taking in nothing in terms of nutrients. And interestingly, meat was the same. And all the vegetables and all the, the really green stuff, all the stuff that we know is good for us was right up high. And so were essential oils. Now, essential oils really do resonate high frequency. So begin to use them and use good therapeutic grade essential oils so that you know that you've got the quality there. It's no good just going and getting something from your local health store for a couple of dollars here and there, or a couple of pounds here and there. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about life in a bottle when you're talking about, high quality essential oils. That's essentially what you're talking about. Even dry herbs and stuff have a decent frequency in them. Fresh produce has up to 15 hertz, dry herbs from 12 to 22, fresh herbs from 20 to 27. I mean, herbs are amazing, keep using go back to the old school way of working, keep using all these things to raise your frequency and to bring you into good health. Essential oil frequencies start at 52 hertz and go as high as 320, which is the rose oil. These higher frequencies create an environment in which disease, bacteria, fungus, cancer, etc. cannot live. So this is the point. When you raise your frequency, when you raise your own vibration, if you like, disease just melts away. It can't survive. But we're bringing into our lives, and not just our lives, but the lives of all living things on this planet, so many frequencies that are degenerative, that are bringing us down, that we would have to be constantly using high frequency things, constantly bringing in high frequency, oils and, all the herbs and everything like that, to be able to counterbalance this, like constantly throughout the day, the same way we're being bombarded with high radioactive frequencies all day. So we would need to be counterbalancing that with the essential oils, or with the herbs, or, with your high vibration foods or whatever, all through the day. Any influence of an EMF on a living being starts at the cellular level. All right, we're talking about really complex issues for living things. So remember that, and remember that, really you have a choice to be able to live in the technological world that we live in and buy into it all and have everything transmitting radio frequencies everywhere you go, or you have the choice to cut it down and maintain a more healthy existence. In all honesty, the only safe environment at the moment for us to be in is that of a natural environment where you're unable to get mobile cell phone response, if you like. And then you can turn off your cell phone and you can detox, and your body, can start cleansing. I mean, it takes a while, but, you'd have to be in that situation. So realistically, I think for the majority of us, that's not going to be a reality. And of course, we're only able to make decisions based on our own consciousness and the things that come into our own life for us to be able to consider and concede to. But I urge you to really consider this as a fundamental way of keeping yourself healthy, and a fundamental way of introducing, real longevity into your life, because all the research is stemming back to diseases that ultimately kill or bring you to an early demise. And it, like I say, because it's everywhere, it's about cutting down and decreasing as much as you possibly can, and taking all the precautions that you possibly can to protect yourself from these low frequency microwave radioactive frequencies that are being sent out from all of our devices and the electronics that we surround ourselves with. So I hope that hasn't been too much of a depressing one. It's definitely one that I think needs to be addressed. Like I said at the beginning of the session today, I feel like I've been let down by so many institutions, really. This should be, we should be aware of all this. We should be going out buying these things with knowledge in our back pockets and a wealth of knowledge, because, if the World Health Organization has 26,000 scientific studies documented for the effects of frequencies, and the degenerative effects of frequencies, then we should know this stuff. But we don't. So I think it's down to us to really begin to share and to begin to introduce knowledge to other people. So I urge you as well to kind of, share this show, get people to tune in, share the knowledge that you've gained here. Do go on to the EMF Health Summit, because it's been absolutely fascinating. Educate yourselves, turn off everything that you can whenever you can, and keep yourselves healthy. It's not just the stuff that you see that is a toxin to your body, but it's the stuff that you don't see. And it's not just affecting you, remember, it's affecting every living organism on this planet and the earth as a whole. So this is the severity of this blanket of frequency that we are covering ourselves in. The things that you can't see sometimes are the things that are what we should be almost most afraid of. So with love and light always, Kirsty Taylor saying good night.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lady Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.